that they're infected, they look fine. Problem is, if a girl sleeps with one of these guys, it can infect her and sterilize her before she ever knows that she's infected. Sterilize means keep you from ever being able to have kids. More girls now and teenagers are getting chlamydia than the flu. It's how rampant it is. But the #1 STD by a landslide, the condom companies, it's their little secret. They don't want anyone to know about it. Why? It kills more girls every year than AIDS does, because it causes 99% of cervical cancer. But why they don't want you to know about it is because the condom does not protect you from getting this STD, because it is spread from mid-thigh to mid-abdomen contact. Any skin-to-skin sexual contact in this region can transmit the virus. Even hand-to-genital contact can transmit it. But they're all hung up on safe sex, so you don't want them to know, they don't want you to know that that whole thing is a lie. As you said, it's human papillomavirus, HPV. 1% of people who get it get genital warts. 99% of people get it, don't get warts. You feel fine, you look fine, you don't get tested. I knew a guy who got married, had a baby girl. She's like a year old. She coughed all the time. So he took her to the doctor. He said, "Hey, doc, can you take a peek at my girl? She's got a sore throat." He said, "Sure." Looked in the girl's throat, and the doctor said, "Sir, I'm sorry, but your daughter has genital warts growing through her throat." And the dad said, "Mike, how could she get that? I don't have a sexually transmitted disease. My wife doesn't have one." And the doctor said, "Well, which one of you two had been sexually active before you're married?" And the guy's eyes got big, and he said, "Well, my wife was a virgin, but I've been around. But look, doc, safe sex, condom every time." And the doctor said, I'm sorry you haven't heard, but scientifically, safe sex is a joke." He said, "Sir, you've contracted human papillomavirus outside of marriage, carried it undetected into marriage. You've given this to your wife, and your child contracted this in her womb, and we'll need to periodically burn the warts off your daughter's throat with a laser because we don't have a cure for this. I'm sorry, sir, and your wife needs to start getting pap smears every year to make sure this doesn't develop in a bad way for her." And the guy sat there, and he was like, "How come no one told me this? How come everyone just told me safe sex? How many people have this? How many people have it?" This is a Journal of Gynecology, the British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. They just did a study of about 17-year-old girls who've only slept with one guy so far. They found out of the 242 women who'd only had one sexual partner, we found that the risk of acquiring cervical human papillomavirus infection was 46%. Meaning nearly half of the girls who'd only had one sexual partner at the age of 17 already had HPV. The good news is the majority of people get it end up being fine. It doesn't cause them any trouble. It usually goes away on its own. But it's so rampant now, it's causing some huge problems like cervical cancer. Why don't they want to tell you about it? Reasons like this. Cosmopolitan magazine, all right? If your girls are not familiar with Cosmo, I actually think that this is a great instruction manual on how to get used by a guy. All right, so all you do is you subscribe, you get used in like 3 weeks. It's really quick. It's great. And some girls will say, "Oh, that's not true. It has, they got great makeup tips." I'm sure they do. Check out what it says on the cover. "Pick him up tips from the editors of Maxim magazine, that runs an article on how to cheat on your wife so she and the kids won't find out." You're learning how to pick up these guys. And then it says, "And more no-brainer lines." No-brainer lines. You want them to think you're smart, and you start off meeting with a no-brainer line. This stuff is a joke. It says here, "Gynecologist news your doctor's too wimpy to tell you." So you're like, okay, more eternal wisdom from Cosmo. Open it up, and it says here, "Dear teenage girls, make sure you don't get a virus during sex." First, it doesn't give you the option of abstinence if you're worth waiting for. Then it says, "Examine the condom tip for tiny holes before sex to make sure that no viruses will sneak through during sex." Thank you. They sort of skipped out the fact that condom's useless in preventing HPV. They sort of skipped out the fact that you can get every STD virtually now by means of oral sex. Why didn't they tell you that? Because 10 pages later, they recommend you give your boyfriend oral sex so he likes you more. This stuff is an absolute joke. Why doesn't anyone else talk about it? Well, this I just got off Planned Parenthood's website for teens. It says, "Sexuality relationship info you can trust from Planned Parenthood." And here it comes. Quote, "Condoms can be an exciting part of sexual relationships." It used to be like falling in love, candlelight dinners. Now it's condoms, so romance is always alive and well with Planned Parenthood. And it says here, it says if you act responsibly and use protection every time, you can have a fulfilling sex life no matter what infection you may have. Thanks, but no thanks. Protection? What kind of joke is this? There's a huge billboard in San Diego near the beach where I surf at called Pacific Beach. And a billboard, all these guys on it, and it said, "Protect yourself, protect your partner, protect your community, wear a condom." Like you're a patriot or something. "Protect the community with my condom." This stuff is a joke. Think about it. Who do you protect yourself from? Your enemies. If you have to protect yourself when you're supposed to be making love and totally giving yourself to someone, it means the timing is off. Wait for marriage. If you want to protect yourself, Forget about condom. The stuff is a joke. It can't adequately protect you. If you want to protect yourself, forget it. Protect your wife, guys, by not sleeping around now so your wife won't end up with cervical cancer. You girls, protect your children who could get STDs if you're promiscuous. Protect them. Lay down your lives for them to guard these people. Why doesn't the government talk about it? Well, here's the big research that the government did. This is called the NIH study. The National Institutes of Health did this huge study on condom effectiveness. This is the most authoritative research that has ever been done in the history of the world on condoms, and what they found is this. For men, they said, for men, we do not have sufficient scientific evidence to prove that the condom can protect men from 6 of 8 of some of the most common STDs, and we do not have sufficient scientific evidence to prove that the condom can protect women from 7 of 8 of some of the most common STDs. I read this, then I read it again. I'm like, how come they're teaching safe sex? I found in a little footnote in it. It said, if you want to get the audio tapes of this conference, send us $200 and we'll give them to you. So I said, fine. I cut a check for $200, mailed it to DC, and in the mail came 20 hours of audio tapes. I started listening to them. 14 hours into it, I found what I was looking for. They had this conference, about 30 doctors, gynecologists on stage, and a huge crowd of people. And you could ask them questions. One lady gets up in the back, and she says, doctors, shouldn't we tell teenagers about HPV? And the doctor gets up, and he said, well, we may want to go there, but he said, look, he said, we have secondary prevention methods. I didn't know what that means. It means burning it or freezing it off of a girl's cervix, which can keep her from having kids. But he says, oh, we've got secondary prevention methods. And then he said, look, he said, if you told teenagers about HPV, he said it would cause an epidemic of panic, fear, and anxiety amongst young people who are just starting their sexual careers. Ha, ha, ha. And all the doctors laughed. Our sexual careers, like we're budding prostitutes or something. Then another lady gets up. She's like, well, doctors, shouldn't you at least tell teenage girls that the condom can't protect them from getting HPV, which could cause cervical cancer? And the doctor said, you do not want to tell girls that. If you tell women that, it'll kill women. And the lady said, what? How was going to kill a girl to tell her the condom can't protect them from the most common STD? And the doctor said, look. He said, basically, look, teenage girls today have no sexual self-control. You tell them the condom doesn't work, they'll throw it away, keep having sex, lose what little beneficial effects the condom might have given them. You need to leave them with birth control. Self-control is not an option for today's girls. You talk about an insult to your dignity, no self-control. I will tell you no self-control. I bought Kristalina for her birthday a Chihuahua, right? One of these little glorified rat dogs. And, you know, this little fur-bearing cockroach is like running all over the place. And we actually just blew up a picture of him so you can see what we're talking about. So here's the little freak of nature. And, you know, the little guy here recently hit puberty, okay, when the dogs are in heat, and he's incapable of abstinence. I even gave him a chastity talk. It didn't go so well. And he didn't get it, so what we had to do is we took him to the vets down at Pacific Beach, and we neutered him. There's no option for a Chihuahua in heat. So here's a picture of him after the surgery. He's got his little satellite dish on his head and everything, a little salad bowl there. He's pretty miserable. And this is how the government basically sees you. Look, teens, you're incapable of self-control. Neuter yourselves with contraception so you can have lifeless love. I happen to have a lot more confidence in you, so does